Lara, I'm so excited to speak with you today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me, Joe. Excited to be on your podcast.
Well, I am particularly excited because we have caught you in the midst of relocation. So, this is quite often a thing that happens with trailing spouses around the world, but we are both based in Singapore. I'll let you do your little introduction in a minute. But when I saw you post on LinkedIn not so long ago that you were doing a very quick exit, I was like, oh my gosh, we need to talk while you're in the midst of it to really get an insight into how that's all going. So I would love to hear who you are, where you are from, and where you are based now to kick us off.
Yes, so I'm originally British from Guildford, capital of Surrey. I was born there, but grew up in Spain from the age of 6 till 12. And then during university, I spent a year abroad in Germany. And then after I qualified as a solicitor, I lived for 6 months in Brussels working at the European Commission. So I'm no stranger to living overseas. Then my husband got a job in Hong Kong. So we moved to Hong Kong. That was my first trailing spouse experience. So moving from London to Hong Kong in 2011. And then 3 years after that, we moved to Singapore, where we have been now for the past 9 years. I'm a mother of 3 daughters, 2 dachshunds and a rabbit. And I'm the head of business development for an English barristers chambers called 20 Essex.
My gosh. Okay, so there's so many things I already want to ask questions about at the moment. So let's go back to the start, and then I want to work our way through in almost chronological order to get us to where you're at. And I'm not even going to put words in your mouth, but I was going to say the frazzled, or we can talk about all of the all of the feelings when we get to that. So tell me, the UK to Spain, are your parents globe trotters? What took your family there for your childhood?
So I'm the only child from a second marriage. So my father was already retired when I was born. And so he thought he would live in the sunshine. So he moved us all to the Sunshine Coast, the Costa del Sol, which is in the south of Spain in Marbella. And there we lived surrounded by 4 golf courses and about 10 minutes from the beach. So it was a pretty idyllic lifestyle in those days. Yeah. So I'm an expat kid.
Wow, how nice. How's your Spanish? Has it lasted the test
It's
of time?
rusty. It's pretty rusty. I definitely think that I feel quite culturally Spanish. Like I really love Spain, and that's my whole childhood. And I love Spanish food. I do like to speak it, but yeah, so rusty. I definitely need a quick trip to Spain as soon as I get back to Europe just to kick things off again.
Well, it would be rude not to, let's be honest.
Yes, those tapas have my name on them.
So good. I spent I don't know how long I was there. I when I was young, footloose and fancy free, I went and did some woofing in Spain. Do you know woofing? So
What
it's
is woofing?
woofing is willing workers on organic farms. So you go and pretty much
Ah, fruit
volunteer.
picking.
Well, I worked on a it was like a horse farm run by a British guy, and he did trail rides up in the mountains out of Granada. So I don't know what I was thinking moving there in literally the middle of August. It was so hot. But yeah, you get fed and watered, and you work whatever the arrangement is with the business or the family or whoever you're working for. And like lots of people do that, traveling all around the world, go and do that. So that might go onto your bucket list for future, Lara. Just planting that there.
Well, don't know about that. That sounds a bit like hard labour. I'm not very good with horses. But yeah, I'm looking forward to living in the countryside in the UK where I might get a couple of chickens. So I'm excited
Stop it.
about farm life. Mm.
Oh, I see. So talk me through. So Spain for sort of early childhood. Where did you do high school?
So I came back to the UK when I was nearly 13, and I went to high school in Wimbledon, home of tennis. So I was there till 18, and then I went to Oxford University and I did French and German, which took me abroad for a year in Germany at the University of Constance, which is in the south. And so that was a great experience. That was, my first overseas experience by myself.
I see. And so then did your law and legal and all of that training and things in the UK then?
Yes, so after university, I got a training contract with a law firm, and I did 2 years at law school at Guildford College of Law, which was sponsored by my firm. And then I joined them for 2 years doing a training contract to qualify as a solicitor. And then after I qualified, that's when I went to Brussels. The European Commission offers a traineeship, which they call le stage. And I did that in Brussels for 6 months. And then I went back to the UK because actually the weather there was really bad. It was just so grey, so rainy, so cold. And I thought actually London definitely has better weather. So I'll go back.
That has to be some sort of record to find somewhere that is worse off weather-wise than London, which is notorious for not having the most fabulous of weather. That's pretty impressive.
Exactly, that's what I thought. So I thought if it's worse, definitely this isn't good.
Oh, so good. So where did your husband pop up in this the scheme of things?
Well, so we met as trainees because so he's half Eurasian like me. So I'm half Japanese and half Scottish, and he's half English and half Hong Kong Chinese. And I spotted him across the room, and I went over and I said, "You're half, aren't you?" That was my opening line. And he said, "Oh, yes,
Smooth.
I am." I know, right? And he said, "Oh, yes, I am." So I was quite intrigued because weirdly throughout my childhood, I had other friends who were also Eurasian like me, but they, of course, they were all, girlfriends, and I don't think I'd ever noticed their brothers before, but it just seemed to me that there weren't any male Eurasians, and suddenly I saw one, and there he was.
And you're like,
And
right,
that
I
was
am
it.
locking that down.
So that was me, age 21. Yes.
Oh, how funny.
So
I see. So he's in the legal profession as well.
he is. So we were both trainees in the same firm, but he was the year above me. And he's actually 2 years above me in university years because he had a year out. But yeah, so he was a lawyer as well. We worked at the same firm, but then when we qualified, we both moved to different firms. And he does banking and finance law. So when he got an opportunity to move to Hong Kong, that's when we thought we would go and see life in Asia.
So talk me through that. Had he spent time in Hong Kong as a child or things, or was this a new experience going back for him as well?
So he was actually born in Singapore because his Hong Kong Chinese father was head of the HSBC bank here in Singapore. So he was born here and wanted to come back and live in Singapore, actually. But there were no opportunities at that point in time. So when he got a position in Hong Kong, he thought, well, that's close enough. Let's go there. So we moved to Hong Kong, and he did have family there. He had been to Hong Kong many times, so he was familiar with it, but it didn't feel like home as Singapore does for him. So, we were always sort of trying to angle for a move across to Singapore. So, when that came up after 3 years, to open an office here in Singapore, he leapt at the chance and said, "Yeah, I'll volunteer for that. I'd love to come across to Singapore and help with that office opening."
Oh, so cool. So he had some familiarity with Hong Kong, but how about you? Had you been? Had you visited? Or was this like going in completely green?
Yeah, no, I had, because since my mother's Japanese, so I had been to Japan, many times as a child, but I'd never been to Hong Kong. And it was in the days, very early days, 2011, when, I did have a smartphone, and there was this fantastic tourist app that showed the glories of Hong Kong on this repeat loop video. And I just kept watching that thinking, my goodness, that looks amazing. And so we were sent on a recce tour. So I got all expenses paid. I think it was sort of a long weekend, maybe 4 or 5 days that we got to go to Hong Kong and look around and see if we could find a house and, just to make sure that we really thought it was going to be good. But I loved it and thought it was amazing. So yeah, we said, right, let's, pack up our house. And in those days, I actually had my own business. I had left law and become an entrepreneur. I had a designer kitchen company with a fellow lawyer. And so I sold that business to my business partner. We packed up our stuff and we moved. And so I had 2 daughters in those days. And so, yeah, I had a third in Hong Kong. She's my Hong Kong bonus.
Oh, cute. So tell me, what was it like arriving? Did you hit the ground running, or did you find it like logistically a nightmare? What did those first few months look like with you and 2 kiddies trailing along with you?
Yeah, initially the most challenging thing actually was the schools, because Hong Kong at that time was really, really busy with foreigners arriving, and there were not many good English speaking schools. It was also because when SARS, so there had been a previous pandemic before COVID called SARS, which was a respiratory infection that particularly affected Asia. So Hong Kong was very hard hit in those days. And it meant that many foreigners had left when SARS had appeared. And so in order to survive, all of the international schools had taken in. So I think previously they hadn't really taken in many local Hong Kong Chinese, but of course they then did let in the local people, which meant that those school places were all taken up by local kids. And then so it was called the English Schools Foundation, ESF, which is a chain of very good schools. And we had a lot of trouble getting our daughters in. So I managed to get, my husband's firm bought a debenture actually for our eldest daughter to get a place at Kowloon Junior School. But actually that was quite a distance from where we were living. And then our second daughter, she got a nursery school place in a place called Wu Kai Sha in Maon Shan, which is north of Tai Po, for anybody who knows Hong Kong. So that's in the New Territories. So one was on, Kowloon side, and one was on in the north, in the New Territories. And so what I did was I found myself driving most of that first year. We got ourselves this massive Volvo XC90, and I would drive in the morning to drop off Jemima, and then I would come back home, have a little bit of time to go to the supermarket. Then I would take Sky up to Wu Kai Sha and then back down just in time to have a quick lunch and go and fetch Jemima from Kowloon, and then zoom back up to Wu Kai Sha and then come down again. So that was I was doing over 1,000 kilometers a week, driving those 2. So yeah, that wasn't such a fun first year. But the second year, I did manage to move them into different schools, and then they were on the school bus. So, that's when my life started.
Wow. That's like Australian numbers of kilometers a week.
Yeah, local taxi drivers said it was more than what they drove, because most of them, of course, were restricted to Hong Kong Island. So they'd sort of go round and round there, and I don't know, maybe do 500 kilometers or something. But yeah, 1,000 is a lot, because it's far. Those 2 locations were really far. So I was just doing this constant triangle. But I had this fantastic dachshund called Barney, and he would sit in the front seat and keep me company. And I'd say, come on, Barney, should we go and fetch the girls? And he'd get in the car, and it was just brilliant.
Oh my gosh. So hang on, we're talking like 2011. So
Yeah.
podcasts hadn't really taken off and things.
No,
Were you listening to
no.
audiobooks or things in the car? Like, what were you doing in
I
the car the
had
whole time?
I had a fantastic 6 CD changer.
Oh
So
my
like this
gosh.
massive cassette thing. So I'd load 6 CDs into it, stick it in the machine. Because yeah, the local radio stations were not the best. Lots of interesting music. So yeah, just mostly listening to music CDs. It would definitely have made a big difference to have had podcasts.
Wow.
Yes.
You could have knocked over like another degree or something just listening
Oh,
to.
I know. Or audio books. I could have got through a novel a week for sure.
I think, well, it must have been a similar sort of vintage. I was that sort of year. I would have been teaching, I think, in Australia, and I was teaching in a school that was about 100 kilometres away from where we lived. And our library, our local library in our town, had a fabulous collection of audiobooks on CDs, and I would just knock over books and books at a time. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, I don't think it occurred to me to buy CD books. I should have done, but I didn't. I didn't think about it. And it wasn't really in the days where, there wasn't Amazon online or anything. I mean,
Mm.
this is how old we are.
Or I'm going to rephrase that. How much things have changed in such a short period of time.
Yes, yes, we are still so young.
Oh goodness. So how did you sort of like, I'm assuming then if you spent pretty much your life in the first year in a car, I can't imagine your social life was that exciting.
Well, you would be wrong there because actually my social life was fantastic, and mainly because the condo I lived in had some really great neighbours. So we lived in this very small place called Villa Monticello, and most of the neighbours were Australian, British, New Zealanders, just a whole bunch of different people, Scots people, just brilliant fun and really, really lively and sociable. And we had loads of kids and they would all play outside, and we were always having parties, and there were so many celebrations for Halloween and Easter and anything that was, an excuse to decorate the place. And we were doing that. And there was this wonderful country club, Clearwater Bay Country Club nearby. And I really got into tennis. So there were a whole bunch of tennis ladies, and, we'd go down as ladies of leisure, tie-tie ladies, tie-tie wives we were. And we'd go and play tennis and have lunch at the club, maybe have a swim. So my second and third years were pretty good, must say. But yeah, the initial, my life as a chauffeur for the first year wasn't as fun.
Oh man, that sounds like you were nailing that real expat life in those year 2 and 3.
Yes, yes. But having had my daughter in the third year, my youngest child, I did think, my goodness, here I am enjoying the life, but my goodness, is this really fair? Shouldn't I contribute to the household income? I do have quite a decent education. So I fell into business development. I got myself a short-term contract of just 6 months in a law firm, doing this business development role. And I hadn't really heard of business development in a law firm before, but I thought, hey, if I've been a lawyer, how hard can it be? So I got this contract and I had a really good time, and I just fell back into work. And then when my husband got relocated, I got another job in Singapore doing the same. And actually, it's been 10 years now that I've been in business development roles.
Interesting. So that first one, was that with a local firm in Hong Kong?
No, it was with a US firm called Winston and Strawn. They're based in Chicago, and it was their Hong Kong office, but I was head of BD for their Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing offices, and Taiwan. Yeah, we opened an office in Taiwan as well.
That's cool. And so they were able to sponsor you and you could get a visa and do all of the things that way, or it was a lot easier
Yeah,
to do work as a dependent there?
yeah. Actually, I don't even remember it crossing my mind that it might be an issue. Yeah, no problem at all to be able to work there. We were not permanent residents. We'd been there for 3 years. You have to be living there for, I think it's 7 years for Hong Kong. So, but no, things were pretty easy. I was able to get that job I started on a 6-month contract because we thought, I had no experience in that area. They were taking a bit of a gamble on me, but they had been looking for someone for a very long time, and they were prepared to give me a go. So eventually I did extend to 7 months because because it was working out very well. But then, of course, because we had to relocate, unfortunately, I had to leave, and they didn't have an office in Singapore. So I wasn't able to transfer with them, which was a shame. They're a really lovely, lovely firm. So yeah, I just had to, go with the flow, take up a new position in Singapore. But I really liked business development, and that was a really good way in. So, anyone thinking about trying a different area, I would definitely recommend trying to find a temporary position. So either a maternity cover or a short-term contract or freelance in some way, just to experiment, could this be a good fit for me? Is this firm a good fit for me? Once you know if the role is good for you, maybe it's the company that's not a fit. And if that's the case, then you can find a better fit somewhere else. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more flexibility now than there was in those days.
That's so interesting. I want to I sort of ask a bit around. I will include in the show notes a link to your LinkedIn profile because I can't actually even remember how we met. We were introduced by someone here in Singapore, but I can't help but bring into the conversation your presence on LinkedIn, and that has been something that I've found thoroughly enjoyable watching watching in my feed. But that's something that we seem to talk a lot about, like with workshops and bits and pieces that we run with the Trailing Spouse Co. Is that there's almost this element that a trailing spouse experience can really give you some time and space to actually think about what you as an individual looks like and build that concept of a personal brand and things. And I would love to sort of just, while I've got you as a captive audience here and you can't escape me with the microphone in front of you, that sort of talk me through how has that sort of evolved? Has that been a parallel thing that sort of happened out of necessity with work and in a business development role, or is that something that you've actively sort of looked at pursuing yourself?
Yeah, so I think I joined LinkedIn like most people way back when, it was still a repository for CVs. And I hadn't really focused on it before. It was something that was just there when you needed a job. But when I did move into business development in Singapore, I needed to put together a panel for an event. So I wanted to find 3 general counsel who work in-house to come in and talk to our lawyers about, what is life like in-house and what do they look for in lawyers when they're instructing. And I thought to myself, well, I don't really know any in-house counsel. Where could I find these people? And I thought, I know, I'll go on LinkedIn and have a look. I wasn't connected to very many people at all, but I went online. I found 3 very good people. I reached out to them through LinkedIn. They answered my messages. I met them then in person for coffee, and I got them to join this panel, and they were absolutely fabulous. And I just thought, my God, this is such an incredible tool. You can find random people, they're prepared to meet with you, and you can put together these kind of things. So I began to leverage it in that way. So I used it quite frequently in that way to identify good people to meet up with for business development purposes. But what happened was in just before the pandemic, so in November 2019, I discovered I had breast cancer. So I left, I had to, go on medical leave for a year. And during that time, I did a coaching course. So I did an executive coaching course with the International Coaching Federation and got an associate coaching qualification. And then I decided, because I needed 100 hours of coaching, I thought to myself, well, let me use LinkedIn to find some willing victims. So I, began connecting with more people. And then after that, I decided that actually I wanted to launch my coaching practice properly and that I therefore needed to be known by as many people as possible. So that was in 2020, that was the point where I suddenly thought, my goodness, I'm going to really look at LinkedIn now and have a look at what this platform does. And I began to experiment with doing my own posts here and there. And I began observing, what happens. So if I do a post at 9 a.m., what happens? What happens if I put it at 3 p.m.? What happens? How can I get engagement? Who is doing well on this platform? Who's posting things that I like? What seems to work? Does somebody's video work? Does an image work? What wording are they using? And of course, by noticing those successful content creators, I began to emulate them, and I devised that, there is a strategy to the way that you post, there is a format to posting, and I began to research more and more into the LinkedIn algorithm, understand that there was an algorithm, and then go deeper into what makes a successful profile. So how can I keep tweaking mine to make it more engaging and more interesting? How can I reach out to more people? How can I attract more people to want to connect with me? And so, the more I got into it and the more my own feed began to get more interesting, I spent more time on it. But it was really that, lawyer mindset where I approached it very much with an academic hat on, and analyzing everything and saying, okay, look, let's see what works and what doesn't and why, and how can I experiment and learn. So I really made it a sort of a pet project. And the more I got in on it, the more fantastic people I met. And, you start these fantastic conversations, firstly in the comment section, but then you move into the direct messaging. Then you might have a Zoom call, because of course all of this was during COVID. So then we'd have a Zoom call and, eventually we'd meet in person. But I've literally met hundreds and hundreds of people on LinkedIn. I now have a network. Well, I have more than sort of 10,500 followers, of whom, maybe several thousand, maybe how many actual connections? I think maybe 4,000 or 5,000 real connections, but then the rest are followers. But my goodness, that is a huge network. It means that anywhere I go, I can meet people that I know. It means that whenever I need help with anything, I can just announce it. And I do really use it as my personal broadcasting channel. So, the fact that you knew that I'm relocating back to the UK, it is because I announced it on LinkedIn, so it's so useful.
Perfect segue. So that is a really, I find that fascinating, and I love that. As far as social media cops a bad reputation globally, but I feel like that LinkedIn has managed to somehow keep it pretty clean as far as it's still actually really useful and helpful and productive, and I spend a lot of time on there every day as well. I'm very much a fan too. But Exhibit A of what you said, that the post that I saw, which was a shout out, do you want to talk us through what sort of has happened in the last little while as far as your household logistics, employment status, physical location, and what's happening with that, and how that's all sort of played out?
Yeah, I mean, so initially when my husband's firm was kind of restructuring after COVID. And yeah, he was a partner in a law firm, but he got pushed out. It meant that, he was looking for new opportunities, but Singapore is a very difficult place when you're very senior and expensive. So, he didn't find anything here and started looking further afield, and eventually found a really great role, but in London. So he took it on a contract basis initially, thinking, let's try it out in London. What does London look like? We haven't lived there for 13 years. Things have changed, especially since Brexit. Is it the place to be? And so he went over by himself in July last year, and was seeing what the life was like, and actually really loves it. He says London is fantastic. He's really enjoyed being back there in the heart of the city, and he does banking and finance, so much more vibrant, to be honest, than Singapore when it comes to that sector. So he really found his feet and was saying, look, actually this is really working out. And so when he was offered a permanent position, we then realized, wow, this is happening. We're actually moving. And initially it was quite traumatic because having been here for a long time and really built my network here and just, really starting to gain the kind of traction that I'm finding here in terms of, my LinkedIn profile, as you say, it means that anytime I go to a legal meetup of some sort, so many people come up to me and say, "Oh, I follow you on LinkedIn. You're Lara, aren't you?" So I've got a sort of certain level of notoriety within the legal scene in terms of being someone that they know. And so it takes time to build that up. I played the long game. It's been several years. But to then have to leave that behind, start from scratch, I'm in a fantastic role here in Singapore with 20 Essex barristers' chambers, really enjoying working with the barristers. And having to leave that role, is quite a shock. So I initially actually went and got some support from a really good therapist to talk it through, mainly because having done 2 relocations before, I was quite traumatized by those. It was a lot of work. It was quite a shock. It's a culture shock, and it's just the sheer logistics. But the first move that I had, I got a lot of support from my mother. She helped me, work out all the packing and sorting things out. But there's a lot involved in a move. We had to get our house in order to rent out. We had to arrange for all the removals. We had to ship the dog, give notice on the schools. All of these kind of things. There's quite a lot involved. But my husband, he just packs his one suitcase and says, "Bye, see you there." So, that happened the first time in Hong Kong and I didn't know what to expect. So I was quite green to it and thought, okay, that's fine. The second time it happened, we were in Hong Kong, and then by then I had 3 daughters to move. And so again, I was thinking about the trauma of schools. But because my husband had lived in Singapore, we were able to get them into a fantastic school, which is called Tanglin Trust, because he was an alumnus there. So we were able to get my 2 daughters who were school age into that school. So that was a big nightmare that was solved quite early. So that traumatic thing was actually allayed, because that was one of the biggest issues. I was saying, look, I don't want to go through being a chauffeur again for a whole year because we can't get our daughters into schools nearby. So that was very good. But again, finding a house, having to find a new job, all of that is a big deal. And then this time, knowing that we're going home, there's a lot of excitement in knowing that we're going home. We've already got many relatives, family and friends, quite a lot set up there. So that's going to be really exciting to go back to that. But at the same time, there a lot of friends who've returned have said there is quite a culture shock. Even though you're going home, it's actually a culture shock because having lived in a tropical climate for 13 years where basically there are no seasons in Singapore, it is a steady 32 degrees C every single day. The sun rises at 7 a.m. The sun sets at 7 p.m. Every single day is the same. We do have monsoon seasons where it rains, but apart from that, it's I wear a t-shirt every day. And so the shock of very, very cold weather, of changing seasons is going to be quite hard. And then also, the job scene. So you were asking about my job. So yes, I am currently interviewing. I've got a couple of really good opportunities. So I'm kind of reaching final stages with them. So I'm quite optimistic that I will have a job before I move back. And that is all. In fact, I posted about this today on LinkedIn. This is all due to the fact that COVID meant that people are comfortable with interviewing virtually. And this is something that they were not comfortable with before. Employing someone is such an important move that everyone wanted to meet in person before. But now that everyone's very comfortable with work from home, with being able to speak to their colleagues on a daily basis virtually. They have no issues with that anymore. They realize that actually, if you ask the right questions, and if somebody is authentic on their Zoom or on their Teams, then pretty much what you get is what's on the tin. So I think people are more comfortable with that, and that has meant that I'm here in Singapore, but I'm able to interview for jobs there, and because I have a set date, my actual move date is the 5th of April. People know, okay, you're definitely coming. This is not just a sort of exploratory, if I get a job, then I will move. Can you get my visa kind of thing? It's like, no, I'm a British citizen. I'm just coming home. I will be there on the 6th of April when I land. This is definitely a thing. And, I'm ready to start on the 1st of May. So I think that makes a big difference. But, my husband, yes, he packed his one suitcase and he left me to sort out the entire rest of this move. And it's very, very complicated because, we're moving a 5-bedroom house. I'm moving 2 dogs. I'm rehoming a rabbit because of the quarantine. I have to rehouse my helper. My domestic helper needs a new home. I have to find myself a new job. We have to deal with a lot of tax issues. We have to deal with lots of complications when it comes to, because we're permanent residents here, there's many things that you need to sort out before you can leave. So this one by far is the most complicated. And I haven't even mentioned the schools. Okay, so my eldest daughter is she's on a gap year, so we're waiting for university offers. She's got one so far, so she's definitely going, which is great. My second daughter, because of the move, we got my second daughter into boarding school early, so we moved her across to a boarding school. It's called Stowe. It's a fantastic school in Buckingham, in the north of Oxford, and so she's really thriving there. So that was a fantastic move for her. And then my youngest daughter, because she's 11, we hadn't realised that we would be participating in the 11 plus. So it dawned on me that all these kids in England are all at these so-called prep schools. I was like, why that prep? What's prep? It's like, it's preparatory. It means preparation for the 11 plus. So all these kids have been at schools that have been preparing them for several years for these entrance exams to go to these private schools, or if you're in the state sector, to go to perhaps a grammar school or another good local school. You do these various exams, but it's not just one exam. Every single school has their own form of these exams. And so poor Annabelle, here she is. Because we didn't know what her chances were, we actually applied to 6 different schools for her. And it was just quite an ordeal. So she was able to do most of the exams remotely here. So some were online computerized tests, but some were written tests that they sent in the post, and it was invigilated at her school. But then others, we had to go to the UK. So we travelled twice to the UK, once in December, once in January. So she would arrive jet lagged, sit these exams and exam conditions in these schools that we had never been to before. And then we also had to go back once she'd passed the exams. You have to pass them before they'll let you in the school. So you have to then go along to an assessment day, which is like, full on assessment, where you're watched and you have to do all these team things and all sorts. And then you also have an interview with the, headmaster or headmistress. And this is a lot for an 11-year-old jet lagged child. And because we had chosen 6 schools that were all over the country, this wasn't like, we would rock up to our old house, sit there in our house and then walk, round the corner to a local school. No, this was us having to do the logistics of staying with various members of family to go and be in position and still have to drive about 45 minutes to get, really early morning to get to these schools for 8:30 a.m. to go in to sit these exams or to participate in these assessment days. So, I mean, it was quite a big deal. And it was really interesting to see the very different approaches from all the different schools. But actually, in the end, she got 6 offers, and so we had a choice, and we were quite surprised how bright she is, because we hadn't really noticed before, to be honest.
Oh, that poor third
And,
child. Listen to it.
yeah. No, I mean, as in, by age 11, you don't really have exams to show. I mean, she is a bright girl in the day, in terms of how she is, but we'd never had hard evidence before in terms of what that would look like compared to her peers in London. So yeah, we were very pleasantly surprised, and she has chosen a school in Abingdon, which is south of Oxford. We've never lived there before. We have no particular connection to that area. So that's going to be another adventure of finding somewhere to live in the countryside. So if you're a listener and you live anywhere vaguely in the Oxfordshire area, please help us out and connect on LinkedIn and give me some advice.
Wow. Goodness me. What an exercise. I'm exhausted even listening to that.
I know, it's exhausting telling it.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think that this is exactly why I wanted to try and catch you before you'd actually exited stage left, and that we could actually chat through the logistics of those sorts of things is like overwhelming. But I'm really intrigued, and again, happy for you to sort of say, okay, well, I don't want to actually tell you any of that stuff, but how did you find the getting some therapy around it and actually acknowledging that this is quite a traumatic thing to do? And lots of our listeners do this stuff relatively regularly and are probably re-traumatizing every time as well. But without going into any major personal details or things, how have you sort of found, or sorry, I should not assume that you found it helpful. Did you find it helpful going and talking to someone? And is there any sort of big picture or broad bits of advice that you found really helpful that might be an interesting takeaway for people listening to this that might be in a similar situation?
Yeah, I think it has all to do with the fact that I discovered coaching. When I was, going through the trauma of my illness, and I discovered coaching, it was just such a revelation to me that it was a form of professional therapy in terms of career therapy, understanding you as a person, what makes you tick, what are your challenges, how can you yourself get over things, what are the things holding you back, what self-limiting beliefs have you got, how can you reframe. And I've always had a very positive mindset, and an ability to connect dots and also tune into intuition very powerfully. And what I found through coaching was that I could really unlock in many people things that they just had not realized before, and reframe things in a very positive way to help them move forward. And because I was doing all of that in coaching, and because I had launched my own coaching business, when I realized, gosh, this move is actually genuinely causing me stress, and I am feeling trauma. Why don't I think about getting some help with that? Excuse me. Which isn't, which is beyond coaching, because coaching is much more to do with your career and how you are professionally. But when it tips into more of your personal life, you really do need therapy. So being a coach, I was very aware of the fact that I needed actual therapy and not coaching. And I happen to live on a road where on the corner of the road, there is this counselling centre. And I would walk past it every day. And I'm quite a believer in the fact that, your world is presented to you on a plate and you only have to notice. And so I kept going past it, and I eventually said, okay, for God's sake, I've recognized that you're putting this on my doorstep, so I have to go into that place. And I thought, right, what I'm going to tell myself is I'm going to go on their website, have a look at who they have. if there's somebody who sounds like they could be a fit, I will just book one session and I will decide for myself if it's for me. But I'm going to be quite firm about, not getting attached to that person. And, if they're not the right fit, I'm going to just walk out of there. And I thought, right, that's okay, because that gives me permission to do that. Whereas before, I probably would have felt like, oh, I can't reject this person, or I've got to stick with them even if they're not right. But now I was like, no, be selfish. This is for you. You're paying for it. Go in there, see if they're a fit. So book this trial session. Oh my God, this lady was fantastic. I really clicked with her, really liked her style and what she was doing. And so booked in. And so I've seen her for many sessions. I pretty much go every Saturday. And I just felt like, wow, look at this. I followed my intuition to go to this place that's right on my doorstep. So I can literally, Saturday mornings, I have my breakfast, trot out my house. It's 2 minutes from my house. It's just so easy. Why make life difficult? And it has really helped me, because there were so many things that I just needed to talk about. And that I needed somebody who's completely, unconnected, no agenda of their own, that I could talk about all of the various traumatic aspects of this, that feeling of being abandoned, basically. I mean, I think that, I'm a very, very self-aware person, and I'm a very, very open person. And because of that, I could share that I felt abandoned again. This has happened to me before. This happens to me all the time. I just get abandoned. Someone packs their suitcase and they leave. I mean, obviously he hasn't actually left me, but it feels the same, right? You feel like you've been left. This person packs a suitcase and off they go. And yes, you pack up and you follow. But this was July last year that he left, and we're not leaving until April. It's a long time of separation, and being a single parent here by myself and doing everything by myself. And, logistically, it's a lot to organize. And that is on top of I have got quite a major job. I do have quite a big job. And so to do that, in addition to all of these many logistical things, and to have so many challenges, such as we didn't know where we were going to live in the UK until we had sorted out the school. So, having to go through all these 18 different stages to get a decision on where we were going to live. So now that we have the school decided, we have accepted the place and taken, paid the deposit for that. So we know we're going to that school. And so actually, once we realized, okay, look, we've got the school place. What would it look like if we asked that school if we could actually come a term early? So that's what we did. And so, we've got a school place that starts after Easter. And so that's really exciting, because it means that another good thing has happened, because then, if Annabelle starts early, she will then have friends who she can see over the long summer holiday. So while we adjust to being in the UK, doing a summer holiday in the UK, we usually go back for a month anyway. But this is going to look quite different, because we'll be there permanently. But we'll be in rented accommodation, and we'll need to find new friends and people to hang out with, and for, Annabelle to find new friends and find new activities during this summer holiday, because both of us will be working full time. We won't have a helper at home. So it's going to be quite challenging.
Even just catching that last bit of it, that it's going to be interesting for you, which I'm sure lots of people listening have had that cutting the cord as far as no longer having domestic help. I've heard lots and lots of stories, particularly Australians, obviously that's the world I roll in, but that will go back to Australia and then move back to Asia within 6 months, because they're like, I can't cope, I haven't actually done the parenting the way that I have to now do it when I'm at home, and I haven't done logistics like I have to do at home where there's no one else. So it's quite interesting coming to Asia myself with a bit older kids. Like my kids were 6 and 8 when we moved here, and I had done all the stuff by myself. We'd had au pairs when the kids were really little, but I felt a bit bad, but I would eye roll a bit with all of these these people being like, it's just really hard. Like, I'm finding it really tough. I was like, you guys are doing this with like another whole adult in your house. I did all of that like on a farm, like 45 kilometers from like the nearest town. I was like finding it quite hard to be sympathetic, but nearly 2 years in, the thought of like leaving and having to do all of this stuff by myself is like, that is traumatic enough. And I'm not even saying that in a taking the mick way. Like, it's really, that's a big adjustment to make, that one thing alone, let alone
Yeah.
moving somewhere else and moving your kids to a country they've never lived in and all of the other things that go with it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, we have been very fortunate to time this when, yes, all three daughters are quite grown up, actually. And, of course, we'll have a cleaner who's going to do the cleaning. But I think that I have been exceedingly spoilt by having help in Singapore. At one stage, I had 2 helpers, and I remember the trauma of when my eldest helper retired. I mean, this is how kind of extreme you can get in terms of your lifestyle. It was I'll tell this story because it's really quite shocking. But basically, I was with these Americans, and this American was saying to me, "Yeah, there's these people that we know, and my God, they're so rich. They've got a chauffeur." And they've got a full-time chef, and they've also got a nanny. And I went, wow, God, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, they've really got that. Yeah, no, that's incredible. And then I went home to my 2 helpers, and and then I kind of looked at them, and I thought, this is kind of strange. Actually, one of you drives my children everywhere. One of you does all the cooking and the cleaning, and one of you actually looks after my child full time. So I guess I've actually got a chauffeur, a chef, a nanny, and a cleaner all live in, and it never occurred to me. Like I just hadn't I honestly hadn't thought of it in that way before at all, and it was quite an eye opener. And then when my helper retired, I was there going, oh my God, what are we going to do when Imelda leaves? Because we will only have one helper. And now, of course, now that Ria, who is, fantastic, she basically is my wife, right? Because she does all my household. She looks after my household. Yeah, what am I going to do without her? When people say, what do you miss about Singapore? What are you going to miss about Singapore? Ria. The answer is Ria. I'm going to miss Ria. She is everything. She's the best cook. She looks after my kids. She makes sure that I can do things last minute that I need to do, and especially business travel. I think I would say that the best thing about Asia is the ability for working women to be equal to men. Because honestly, this has been the equalizer. The fact that I need to do business travel, I need to go out to evening events, I need to be able to do things last minute, I need to be able to do last minute projects, and and I just would not be able to do that as a mother of 3. I would not be able to do that without help from someone else. And so, that is the biggest benefit of being an expat. And I would really recommend to any woman who is currently sitting at home with small children, but in a country where you can get affordable assistance, whether that's a nanny or whether that is, a helper. Make sure that you're not so high and mighty and proud that you go, because actually there are so many women who come in and they go, oh, look at you with your helper. I can do it all myself. And it's like, well, okay, yes, but that's like having a cleaner in your home country. Yes, you can do it yourself. It doesn't mean that you can't clean the bath. But is that a good use of your time? Do you have enough money that you could afford to pay for a helper to come in and do that for you? And actually you are giving another woman or a man a job. You know, you're providing employment opportunities to people who might not otherwise have it. So I would say that the opportunity this gives you to get back into the workplace, to upskill yourself, to think about, as I said, getting yourself perhaps a temporary contract or going freelance on something. Maybe you've done a career back home that isn't a possibility where you are currently. So what else could you do? Because you could do something temporarily. Maybe you could do website design or logo design, or perhaps you could start your own podcast, or you could do something though, because the opportunity to have help that frees you up to go out there and do something, volunteer work or anything that keeps yourself, thinking and current. Make sure you keep up with all your IT skills. Make sure that you are learning things on YouTube, listening to podcasts and learning, developing yourself. Read self-development books, listen to these fantastic podcasts. They're the most incredible learning tools. There is absolutely no excuse these days for people not to, harness technology. I listen to podcasts every single day. I watch YouTube videos all the time. I'm always improving my skills. And that's what helps me get really good jobs and to learn every day and meet amazing people, work with amazing people. You can only do that if you invest in yourself.
Preach, sister. I don't know what else to say to that. And join the Trailing Spouse Co for free and come along to our in-person or online sessions as far as learning and things. I think, oh my gosh, you've just done such a beautiful, I guess, wrap up at the same time of like kick up the butt, I think, as well. And I think that while a lot of people can sometimes feel down in the doldrums as far as their physical location or their inability to work in paid labor, that self and professional development is key. Like you can do so much transformative work on yourself and your career and your own learning and those sorts of things that doesn't cost you a cent. And if you've got nothing but time, like what an amazing opportunity to do that. I think that coupled with building your professional development and using tools like LinkedIn, like I listened to the bits and pieces that you've done in Singapore and being able to leverage a platform like LinkedIn. I did very similar things and did that from a farm in rural Australia that I have made, like I said, had hundreds of meetings and met people from all over the world and things that you can make direct contact with people that you're interested in or who wrote a book that you liked and appreciated or you heard interviewed on a podcast. And I've connected with lots of people that I've interacted with like that who have become friends and my online friends. My husband thinks I'm hilarious. He's like, oh gosh, is that another one of your your cyber friends? And I say, yes, regularly.
Exactly. I mean, it is about, a lot of people are in very difficult circumstances when they trail after their spouse, and I would hope actually that this podcast is being listened to by men as well. In Singapore, there are actually many trailing spouses who are not female. And those men also find it very, very difficult. The employment situation in Singapore makes it very difficult. So when you come here and you get a job on an employment pass, your spouse can come on a dependence pass, but that doesn't give them the right to work. And so lots of people find themselves suddenly redundant, as it were. But as you say, there's so many networking opportunities. There are ways to upskill. There are ways to keep yourself busy and to make sure that you are not just wasting your time, because see it as a gift. It's actually a real gift to have time to read, time to watch YouTube videos, time to spend time with your family, really enjoy your kids. and enjoy the lifestyle that you can have, in all of these different places. Sometimes the more remote, actually, the better opportunity there is to work on yourself. And so there is no excuse not to connect with others. You don't need to be lonely. You can totally connect on LinkedIn or on Facebook, book remote calls with people or telephone calls. You can still pick up the phone, that exists. And then just gradually grow your network and plan ahead. Hopefully you won't be stuck somewhere for too long. Time does actually fly, but make sure you don't waste time. Make the most of it. And listen to my podcast, which is The Legal Genie, especially if you're involved in the legal industry. So the Legal Genie podcast is something that I use to mentor younger lawyers, but also to talk about mindset. I have a lot of friends who are not in the legal industry who said that they've listened to it and they've enjoyed the mindset that, we talk about, and all the different things that you need to think about to live your best life now. And so I definitely wish everyone luck. If you are about to make a move abroad, or you're about to go home, or you're currently enjoying being somewhere, it's a real gift to be an expat. We can all learn so much. It's a real opportunity. So make the most of it. Don't waste your time. And, reach out on LinkedIn, or, follow me on LinkedIn. And I hope that, what I've said today has been a bit insightful.
100%. Thank you so much for your time, Lara. You've done a perfect little wrap up for me. I don't even need to do anything else. Thank you so much for your time.
One podcaster to another. Always happy to help.
Thanks, Lara.
Thank you.